Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Real estate affordability is based on your income, the price of housing, and interest rates. Also, the power of now. Today on Get Rich Education. Countless property investors get killed with maintenance costs, but that's far less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental properties. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, go to newconstructionturnkey.com. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Hanover, Germany to Hanover, Pennsylvania, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education, talking about the power of now. You know, I think we all get caught up in thinking about what's coming next in your life. And you're either anticipating some future event or you're fretting about some future unknown. But in this one life of yours, all you've ever really known or experienced is the present moment. I'd like to think that I stay present more than others, but I think we all tend to do this somewhat and actually think about the future too much. Look, when I go out on a hiking trail, while I'm driving to the trailhead, I anticipate what it's going to be like when I get to the parking lot. Then when I leave the parking lot to begin the hike, I often spend too much time thinking about what it's going to be like when I get to the top of that mountain, my destination. Well, along the way, I could have been enjoying the wildflowers or the vista a bit more. And then shortly after I make it to the top of the mountain, I soon anticipate returning and descending back the trail to where the car is, thinking about how nice it's going to be when I do get back to that parking lot where I've got that food to enjoy in the car. And then once I'm in the car, I anticipate getting home and getting a shower when I could have instead enjoyed that seaside drive home more than I just did. So the now is often underappreciated in your life and certainly underrated compared to what's next. More on that later and how that relates to you as an investor. What about now in the economy and what that means to real estate? Well, it was actually last month that the United States hit its longest economic expansion in history when it saw its 121st consecutive month of growth. That's a streak that began back in June of 2009, an unbroken streak, and we're now in our 122nd consecutive month of an expanding economy. Well, you know who's going to take credit for this.
You have the lowest level of unemployment in the history of our country. How does somebody fight that, right? How does somebody fight it, right?
Well, I don't know. In the economy, there's typically a substantial lag time between a policy change and the results. So which president should really get the credit? And does the president get too much credit or blame for the economy at all? Yeah, probably. Now, when unemployment is low, like it is now, meaning that most anyone that wants a job has a job, then in theory, what employers have to do is offer workers more money in order to attract them and retain them so that they don't go work somewhere else, because the employee could easily go off and work somewhere else. Offering employees more money then pushes wages upward, and that stokes inflation. That is what is known as the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve is just an economic paradigm that basically says that when many people are employed, then inflation typically goes up, but inflation and wages really haven't increased that much, so I don't know if the Phillips curve is holding true in this economy. In fact, it often does not hold true. One area this affects real estate is with one of the most central and most talked about real estate words really of the last few years, and that is affordability. Real estate prices have risen faster than employee wages on a national basis. Well, that stifles affordability. Well, this lower affordability, that is good for you as a real estate investor that rents property to others, because when a first-time buyer can't form a down payment to afford a home, they must become your renter or stay your renter. Now, let's look at affordability regionally across the United States in just a minute here. Housing Wire was reporting on this. A good real estate agent might tell you that the general rule of thumb when buying a home is to follow a price-to-income ratio of 2.6, meaning that if you can afford the price of the home on 2.6 years worth of household income, then it can be considered affordable. So for example, for a $260,000 home, your household's income would be $100,000. That's that 2.6 price to income ratio. So the higher the number, the less affordable. But for home buyers in most parts of the country, that 2.6 threshold is simply out of reach, and you've got to pay more than 2.6 times income for a home. So looking back over the last several decades, price-to-income ratios have shot up since the 1960s. They surpassed the 2.6 mark in the 1990s, and they've nestled around 3.6 for the last few years, meaning for the $100,000 household income, you'd have to stretch that out to make payments on $360,000 worth of home, not $260K. Well, it's that phenomenon exactly that puts real estate in most markets well out of reach for the average earner. Median home prices have risen in recent decades because they've grown at 4 times the rate of household incomes since 1960. 4 times. Since that time, median household incomes have risen 29%, and median home prices have increased 121% during that time. For decades, people have now spent a lower percentage of their income on things like food and clothing and more on housing, and renters have been hit hard too. It's not just homeowners. Median gross rent has increased 72% since the 60s, and that's surpassed adjusted incomes twofold. And that report concluded with, well, just what I had said earlier. Rising rents and increasing home prices make it harder than ever to save for a down payment and for people to afford monthly mortgage payments, so they stay renters. Now, of course, great geographic differences exist, and there are only 16 markets out of the nation's 100 most populated cities where the average earner can afford a house below that 2.6 sweet spot. The disparity between incomes and home prices is greatest in the West, but the Midwest, that stayed exceedingly affordable with almost no gap between rent and income growth. So that means that renters have the opportunity to save for a down payment to afford a median mortgage in the region. But of course, here, we're catering to those people that don't, okay? You and I, we're buying in affordable, low-cost regions in the Midwest and South where you can rent an income property to someone that either can't own or doesn't prefer to own, but yet they still have enough income to pay rent to you. But, you are able to buy a property for a low cost there yourself in these more affordable cities. So let's talk about some of those. Let's look at this chart reported again by Housing Wire. It's the most and least affordable cities based on this price-to-income ratio. We'll start with this group of most affordable cities out of the 100, and then we'll work our way up to the more expensive. Okay, Toledo, Ohio is the most affordable market with a 2.14 ratio, meaning that the median home price is 214% of the median area income. That would just be another way to say that. The second most affordable, Scranton, Pennsylvania at 2.15. Dayton, Ohio is next, 2.26. We just spotlighted the Dayton, Ohio market 2 weeks ago here on the show. Syracuse, New York, the next most affordable market in the nation. That is deep in upstate New York. Very different dynamic than what's going on in urban New York City there. Wichita, Kansas, 2.34. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was also at that same level. Akron, Ohio, 2.39. Rochester, New York, again, that's upstate New York, is at 2.43. Columbia, South Carolina, still very affordable, 2.47. Oklahoma City, 2.50. Little Rock, Arkansas, and Omaha, Nebraska, both at 2.55. Tulsa, Oklahoma, getting a little less affordable now, but still highly affordable, 2.56. And we've got both Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Greensboro, North Carolina, at 2.57. And then finally, St. Louis, Missouri, still coming in highly affordable at 2.59. And then looking at this least affordable grouping of markets, so certainly not cash flow markets, and we're going to get even less and less affordable as we go down this grouping. Boise, Idaho at a 4.93 price to income ratio. I knew Boise was getting challenged on the numbers, but I didn't realize that it had become that unaffordable and that disadvantageous to cash flowing investors. Miami, Florida at 5.03. Denver, Colorado getting even less affordable now, 5.05. Boston, Massachusetts, notoriously pretty unaffordable, that came in at 5.16. The price-to-income ratio in Portland, Oregon, 5.23. Here we go, New York City, 5.53. And then really we've got a grouping of a bunch of these California cities that are notoriously expensive. San Bernardino, California, 5.63. Stockton at 5.66. Here we go, Seattle, 5.69. Sacramento, California, a 5.78 price-to-income ratio, meaning a home costs 5.78 times the amount of the median income there. Sacramento, 5.78. Oxnard, California, at a 7 exactly. San Diego, 7.30. Honolulu, Hawaii, 8.07. We're now over 8. Very unaffordable, very challenged, almost impossible for cash flow. San Francisco, California, 8.79. Los Angeles, California, 8.83. And finally, the least affordable metro of them all, with home prices 9.69 times higher than the median annual income, is San Jose, California. Yes, so it is actually those more affordable markets in the Midwest and South that I discussed first, where you can kind of exploit this arbitrage. Wherever you live or whatever your income is, you can exploit that difference and buy in affordable places and rent to people that, despite the affordability in their region, choose to rent or have to rent. So yeah, it's actually in those inland regions where it would make financial sense for a renter to become a buyer that you want to rent homes to. And there were actually some GRE turnkey markets there on that most affordable side of the list, like Dayton, Oklahoma City, and Little Rock, Arkansas. It's people in those higher-priced, unaffordable, mostly coastal cities where it makes sense for those people to be renters because for a resident, renting is often cheaper than the cost of owning in places like Boston, New York City, Miami, and coastal California. So I think from your perspective, it's a little counterintuitive. If you buy in expensive, unaffordable coastal markets, you might think that makes sense for you as a landlord. Maybe you would reason that, well, since others can't afford it, that they'll have to be your renter and that they'll have to keep staying there. And there's only a tiny shred of truth to that. But the property is unaffordable for you as well as an investor. That's the bigger factor. And you don't collect much rent from the tenant proportionally for that high price that you paid in those coastal areas, in those less affordable areas. Now, we talk about housing affordability. Your income and the price that you have to pay from a property are certainly key, but of course, most people buy a property based on the monthly payment amount rather than the total purchase price of the property. And this means that affordability is affected by the mortgage interest rate that you have to pay. Mortgage rates really aren't so much about the cost of your property. It's really more about your cost of money. Effectively, it's how much you're paying to rent the bank's money. That's what an interest rate is, how much you're paying to rent the bank's money. Now, the Federal Reserve meeting and their interest rate decisions seem to get a lot more attention than they used to. And maybe part of this is just that the Fed is more transparent than they used to be. Remember back when we had Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan? He was chairman from 1987 to 2006. And after he made a public announcement, people were trying to parse between the definition of words like moderate and modest and what they each meant, trying to interpret all this minutia. It was nuts. Today's Fed chair, Jerome Powell, he's very different. Sometimes he tells you beforehand whether he plans to change interest rates or not. Quite transparent. Though the interest rate that they change, the federal funds rate, does not directly impact mortgage rates, there is a long-term positive correlation there. But did you know that their effect is perhaps not as great as you thought? Now, if your mortgage interest rate drops 0.25%, how much in interest do you think that saves you each month per $1,000 borrowed? Any idea? On a $100,000 mortgage, say your interest rate drops from 5.25% down to 5%, that difference in your monthly mortgage payment is just $15 lower, about a $15 difference. And of course, that transfers straight through, and that's also $15 greater cash flow. Really, then, when the Fed changes direction and decides to do something like stop raising rates and stay put, or stop staying put and begin to lower rates, that says a lot about where they think that the future direction of the economy is going. But do you really understand why the Fed raises interest rates or lowers rates in the first place? I think that if you understand this, you definitely better put together and connect the dots in this economic ocean that a credit-based asset like real estate swims in. And you're playing above the rim rather than just kind of vibing with the latest buzz from the latest Fed meeting, which was just last week. So I'd like to play this for you. This is me talking on Get Rich Education TV. It's less than 3 minutes in length, and I'll be right back to comment. It's explaining how the Fed works. This is called How the Fed Affects Your Money. All right, so following the Fed is not a great spectator sport like watching the NBA Finals or seeing motorcycles jump off ramps, but their decisions affect your interest rate, which is your cost of money. The Federal Open Market Committee has 12 members and they manage the U.S. money supply. They want economic growth and stable prices. Now, why would the Fed raise interest rates on you? To cool an overheating economy, which helps slow inflation. Now, just think about it. If interest rates were high, like 15%, how motivated would you be to borrow to launch or expand a business or borrow to buy an income property? Not so likely because that's a high interest rate. You'll hear the term rate hike a lot. It just means an interest rate raise. I wish they'd just say raise. Why exactly does the Fed raise interest rates to combat high inflation anyway? That is because high inflation makes consumers lose faith in currency, and high inflation also means variable inflation, and then that makes it difficult for people and businesses to plan. Now, oppositely, why would the Fed lower interest rates? To stimulate a sluggish economy. See, if rates are low, like 3%, well, now you'd have an incentive to open a business or buy property with a mortgage. You will stimulate economic activity. You'll see the media use terms like hawkish and dovish to describe the Fed's temperament as well. Now, a hawkish stance, that just means that the Fed is guarding against high inflation. Therefore, a hawkish Fed would quickly raise rates to put the brakes on inflation. A dovish stance means the opposite. They don't take aggressive action when they signal that they're not going to change rates. That's a dovish tone. The Fed has 8 regularly scheduled meetings each year, and this is where they announce if there is going to be an interest rate change, and it's usually a quarter point at a time that they make those changes. Financial markets watch these meetings closely. The president nominates the Fed chairperson for a 4-year term, and then the president and the Fed chair are supposed to be independent from each other. This means that sitting presidents should not make suggestions about the Fed's direction, but some have. Donald Trump has made remarks to current Fed chair Jerome Powell to chill with the interest rate raises. You see, presidents don't want to see the economy be slowed during their term. They want lower rates so that economic activity is stimulated under their watch. Well, there's way more to the Fed. This is just a quick, keep it simple overview. Although the play-by-play is about as interesting as watching your neighbor whack weeds, know that the Fed affects your cost of money. The Fed affects your cost of money, and that's part of affordability. That's me from Get Rich Education TV. You can watch me in that video and other explainer videos like that by going to getricheducation.tv. Well, when we talk about the power of now, you can't predict interest rate changes, but you can understand how they work now. In fact, real estate investing itself overall, it's for you if you want to live a better life both now and in the future. A 401k participant reduces their now because participation means you've chosen to reduce your salary now. I think that part of the reason that people participate in employer-sponsored retirement plans is because it's just something that's easy. It's so easy that many employers now have automatic enrollment, where unless you specifically opt out, your employer automatically reduces your paycheck amount and diverts it into what I like to affectionately call a life deferral plan, a 401k. How easy is that? If you do nothing, then you are in. That's auto enrollment. Well, really, just like most things in life, if you take the easy route out and do what everyone else does, then you get everyone else's result, and that result ain't much, right? It's easier to watch America's Got Talent from the sofa with a bag of kettle chips than it is to do burpees and deadlifts in the gym. Well, who do you think gets the better result there? Sometimes I get the question from people where they want to know if they should contribute to the retirement plan just at least up to the amount of the employer match, if you do have a match. Because that way, you feel like you get a 100% return, even if you don't get to enjoy the income and earnings until you're older. Well, I've got to tell you, I have not run the numbers on that specifically, but I know that Tom Wheelwright has said that it usually doesn't make any sense to participate even up to the employer match amount. He is the most recurrent guest in the history of the show here. He's been on with us 12 times or 13 times, so maybe I'll ask him about his rationale for that next time that he's here. We already know that with any type of mutual fund investing, after inflation, emotion, taxes, fees, and volatility, your return is about zero. We already know that with real estate, you've typically got 5 simultaneous profit centers, such that any return of less than 20 or 25% per year is actually disappointing. But above this, in the whole, should I contribute to a retirement plan at all or not? If you're asking yourself that question, I think there's really a larger question that you have to ask yourself, and it goes beyond a question of mere math. It's really only a question that you can answer, and that is this: how well do I want to live now versus how well do I want to live later in life? I mean, we're talking about the power of now. Many underestimate a great risk of investing in 401ks, and that is, how much will I be able to enjoy this income stream that doesn't even begin until I'm in my 60s and 70s, at which time I must begin to pay tax on it as well. That's income that is merely projected and unrealized, often for decades. So what's perhaps more important to you in your life than rate of return? What's more important than tax treatment? Or what's even more important than absolute income amount? It's when you get the income. 401ks pay you when you're kind of old. Income properties pay you both today and when you're older. They enhance your todays without mortgaging your tomorrows. There's something to be said for delayed gratification in life. For example, you might accumulate capital in the short term to make a down payment on your next property. I mean, that is some measure of delayed gratification right there. But delayed gratification, that should not be a long-term condition. You get one life to live. I think to help emphasize the power of now, let's listen in together to Eckhart Tolle talking about his book called The Power of Now, along with Oprah here. This is about 4 minutes in length.
Now, to most people, the present moment almost doesn't exist, because what they're really interested in is the next moment or the one after that. So they live always towards the future. They live towards the next moment. And unconsciously, they regard the next moment, the next point in the future that they need to get to, as more important than this moment. Not realizing that the future moment that they so desperately want to get to, wanting to get it out of the way as quickly as possible, needing to get to the end point, on a small scale, on a large scale. And so they don't recognize that the future has no existence except as a thought form. So when you always live towards the future, you live your life trapped in a conceptual reality of thought forms, which assumes a greater significance for you than the immediate reality of life, which is always now. Because your life consists entirely of the present moment. If you truly realize the significance of that statement, your entire life consists of the present moment. Your life is never not this moment. Even when you remember the past, you can only remember it now. And when you think about the future, you can only think about it now. But people live as if the present moment were an obstacle that they need to overcome in order to get to some better point, which never arrives. So that's a mad way to live, and it makes living hard. It makes living into an effort. That alignment with where you are right now, to be totally where you are and whatever you are doing, even if it doesn't look like the life purpose that you want for the next 30 years, whatever you are doing now, to be total in doing it, and no matter what it is, to be true to life by being true to this moment.
There is always only this one step, and so you give it your fullest attention. This doesn't mean that you don't know where you're going. It just means that the step that you're taking right now is primary. The destination is secondary. And what you encounter at your destination once you get there depends on the quality of this one step. Whatever you're doing in any given moment, if you do it your best, it leads you to the next best moment. So you don't have to worry about what's the next moment coming if you only do your best in this moment.
That's right, because when the next moment comes, it comes as this moment.
Right.
You never experience the future as the future. You experience the future when it comes as the now, because that's all there is.
It's all there ever is.
And that's an amazing realization for people to realize life is always just this. It's always the now.
And what happens is most people are living their lives as though the destination, the end, the end is what it's all about.
Yes, as if the end were more important than
the means.
The means. And so the means and the end, however, are one.
Right.
And that means you actually, you determine what kind of future you're going to experience by deciding to be totally aligned with the present moment.
The future sure matters, but the future is overrated. The present, the now, is what is underrated. Yes, you're often in this for the income, but ultimately, you are in this for the outcome. I'm back with more. This is Get Rich Education.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord.
Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
Would you like to know the easiest way to create wealth and passive income with real estate? This is Marco Santarelli with Norada Real Estate Investments. Now you can access the best deals without the stress or hassle of having to find, renovate, or manage those properties. We save you time by providing you with passive income investment properties in some of the best U.S. markets. Learn more by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. There's no obligation and nothing to buy. Simply visit PassiveRealEstateGuide.com and get your free copy today. That's PassiveRealEstateGuide.com.
For a real estate investor like you seeking an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. Over the years, you've heard President Chaley Ridge generously devote her time to you here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in most U.S. states, and you're going to find out how they've helped more people realize their dreams of real estate financial freedom than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Tom Wheelwright. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. You're listening to the show that's created more financial freedom for people than nearly any show in the world, leading with education, adding some sprinkles of inspiration, and keeping real estate investing actionable for you too. Next week, prolific economist and author Jim Rickards makes his Get Rich Education debut here with us. I'm looking forward to that with you. Now, if you subscribe to our email newsletter, which you can get for free at GetRichEducation.com, you might remember that I sent you the renter migration report that was compiled by the company called Apartment List. In any case, the top markets for renter in-migration in the United States were Tampa, Florida, and Denver, Colorado. Now, the numbers don't work in Denver ever since prices became relatively unaffordable there years ago. You might even remember that they were part of that unaffordable list that I cited here earlier in the show. But the numbers work in Tampa, St. Pete. And why exactly do cash-flowing real estate investors like Tampa? And that includes me. A lot of reasons. The area has population growth double the U.S. average. Tampa has a low unemployment rate and a low cost of living. Florida is the only eastern state with no income tax. That fact alone is bringing in a lot of new residents. There is low property tax there. They have diverse business sectors. In fact, Tampa is the #1 relocation destination for professionals. That's by the National Association of Realtor data. Great climate there. Proximity to some of the best beaches in the USA. It's a landlord-friendly state when it comes to landlord-tenant law. And Tampa submarkets have rent-to-price ratios of 0.8% to 0.9%. And by the way, some of those Tampa submarkets where the numbers really work are places like Port Richey, Newport Richey, and Holiday, Florida. They're all north of the metro. I'd like to give you a personal invitation to come meet up with me for our Tampa real estate field trip, October 10th through 12th. That is coming up really soon, and it's time to register for the event. I'd really like to meet you. It's a chance for you to see a cash-flowing market in person as well. In fact, the event is only about 9 weeks away now. Yeah, October might seem far off, but that's only 9 weeks away. So get all the details and register for the event at realestatefieldtrip.com. We've even kept the price of attending way down for you. In fact, I expect that it will cost more to host the event than we can even offset in any registration fee. In fact, the early bird registration rate is ending soon. At our meetup in Tampa, St. Pete, we'll look at some of America's top real estate investment markets together on the trip again, October 10th through 12th. That is a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, so you'll enjoy an opening casual Thursday night meet and greet with me and fellow Get Rich Education listeners like you. Then the next day, Friday, it's classroom instruction directly from me and my Tampa team right there at the Host Hotel, which is your recommended place to stay as well. So that will be me for the classroom instruction. It'll also include the turnkey provider, whom you've heard here on the show with me before. You'll also hear from a mortgage loan officer on that day that specializes in income property. You've also heard him on the show before. And also speaking will be an expert and provider of your income property insurance, and she'll have the ability to answer any specific questions you might have about insuring your property there. And then finally, on the last day, Saturday, we'll tour those exact investor advantage neighborhoods and walk cash flowing property. I'll even treat you to lunch one of the days. It's not some property sales pitch. I wouldn't even ask you on one of those. In fact, there are no properties for sale on the tour at all. If you're interested, you can contact the provider later. So get all the details and register at realestatefieldtrip.com. You know what else is interesting there? The turnkey provider keeps in touch with their investors through a podcast, among some more conventional ways as well. Just another way for you to feel comfortable about investing out of market in case you never have before. So I want you to come. I want to meet you and hear about your real estate portfolio, or maybe you don't have a real estate portfolio and you're just looking to start one in Tampa or even somewhere else. And since the trip is October 10th to 12th, depending on where you live, it might be a great way to sort of extend your summer in sunny and warm Florida. And you can hang around after the tour as well, of course, and enjoy all those Tampa attractions like Busch Gardens and the Florida Aquarium. And then Disney World is only a 90-minute drive from Tampa. And again, the tour starts Thursday night and ends Saturday afternoon. It's Get Rich Education's Tampa field trip. Space is limited, and when it's gone, it's gone. You know that I like to end the show with something actionable for you that's really going to improve your life, and I'm really thrilled to leave you with this one. I look forward to meeting you personally in terrific Tampa. Speaking about the power of now, get in before we close this queue of early bird registrants where you're guaranteed the very lowest price. Get all the details and register for the event at realestatefieldtrip.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.